This week, I'm demonstrating how I trim one of these tall, angular bowls, taking them from a shape that's very curved and turning them into something that's much more angular and sharp. These are tricky pots to trim as they're refined so intensively, but after making 2 successful, smaller versions recently, I'm dead excited to see if I can make this shape work when scaled up. This is the follow-up from last week's video, which shows the simple throwing of this shape, and specifically how I throw larger forms with 2 lumps of clay that are centered together to make the process easier, and I'll leave a link to this video on screen now and in the description below. Now, perhaps the best advice I can give you about making pots like this is to let them dry really slowly. You don't want to rush pieces like this, as if they dry faster on one side than the other, it can sometimes cause quite a significant undulation in the object. So with these, I let them dry beneath those buckets for 3 days straight. At this stage, they're mostly leather hard, but just a touch soft. But crucially, I was able to dry them very slowly in a stable environment, which means the openings of these pots are as round as they were just after being thrown. Whereas off camera, I did make a third piece, which I rushed and dried overnight. And despite being thrown to the same exactness, one slither of the rim and the wall dried out much more quickly, and as a result the entire form of it distorted. Ultimately it was salvageable, but it made for some really tricky turning, whereas trimming these 2 more carefully dried out bowls was just so much more straightforward. As it stands, they are just still a bit too soft, which you can see when I run my finger across the bottom, like so. Clear, visible smudges are left in the wiring off marks. This and the bases still feel a bit tacky and soft, and if you can easily indent the bottom by pressing a finger into it, then the clay is still a bit too soft to trim. Later that afternoon, after things had firmed up a bit, just to make sure the openings on both of these were properly round, I centered them, and then I placed a bowl into the opening which I pressed down, and then I just turned away the very slight bit of movement there was in the lip. It's better doing this when the clay is still slightly on the soft side, otherwise you could quite easily crack it if the clay is too brittle. The bases are almost there, but in order to stop the rims from drying out too much, I'm going to wrap some plastic around them, like so. And finally, a few hours later, the bottoms of these bowls feel much drier and are no longer sticky, nor do they smudge, and the material itself doesn't feel damp and cold. Instead, it now feels pretty warm and incredibly hard. But importantly, it's not yet approaching the bone dry stage either. The clay is still very much leather hard. Now the first thing I do is just trim the base completely flat and smooth. This will make it attach to the metal wheelhead much more securely, as the clay beneath the surface is just a touch softer too. There's also this period once a year where the sun shines directly in my eyes from a skylight above, so I hung a bit of cloth in front of it. But then I also had to take the dog for a walk, so I covered the pot with plastic to stop it drying out any further, and now the real trimming can begin. I brush a band of slip onto the wheelhead and then place the bowl on top of this. It's then tap-centered and the friction causes the slip to dry out quickly, holding the bowl very securely in place. The first thing I do is just smooth over the interior surface, flattening the more pronounced throwing rings and trimming this flared out lip into an edge that's much sharper and straight. I also work the lip itself to a finer edge to give the impression that the pot is thinner and lighter than it could actually physically probably be. I then run a damp sponge over the interior, softening the clay before compressing it and burnishing it into a smoother surface as compared to the sort of scratchy finish it had previously after being scraped over with a metal kidney. I've become very cautious about trimming this indent at the top, mainly out of fear of making it too thin, as in the past when trimming one of these, when I turned it upside down onto the lip, the weight of the pot above it caused this section to buckle and collapse, so I've left it probably about 4 to 5 millimeters thick at this point. The next step is to trim away much of the excess clay on the exterior to create the more distinct angular shape. This is the type of trimming I love. The tool is often held with 2 hands to keep it stable, and as I'm trimming the right way up, I can feel the cross-section the entire time, which is helpful as I can identify the thick and thin spots. Trimming like this really feels like I'm turning wood on a lathe, as it's very different from how pots are conventionally trimmed upside down. The one thing I'm really starting to notice is that many of my metal kidney tools, which I use to scrape straight edges, are actually no longer even straight. So I think when I have a moment soon, I'll be grinding these back to have a straight edge once again. Next comes my favourite bit of trimming, which is done with a ludicrously sharp tungsten carbide turning tool made by Devon, or Sophisticated Pagan, as you might know him. The walls here are probably about 2 centimeters thick, so there's plenty of clay to turn away to create the desired shape I want. Despite this being a curve tool, as long as I move slowly enough, it's possible to trim mostly flat surfaces. And by using a curve tool like this, the point of contact is really small, which means the blade is very unlikely to jitter or bounce as you trim, as compared to say a flat blade like this. This means I can be far more aggressive in my turning when using that curved blade, as I can press it in with a lot more force. But it still obviously doesn't leave as flat a surface as this tool does. You may also notice that when I use this particular trimmer to turn away significant amounts of clay, I only use the very tip of the blade. Then there's this turner, the blade of which is just very small and thin, so it too is great to be used aggressively. As for this foot portion, in previous iterations I think I've made it a bit too wide, so I'm really going to focus on making it thinner and taller for this pair of pieces. Obviously, a narrow foot doesn't make it a particularly functional object, as the likelihood of it tipping to either side is very high. But truthfully, I'm not really making these with function in mind, and instead I sort of see them as sculptural objects. When turning these upside down, I make sure there's no clay left on the wheelhead that could otherwise jam itself into the rim, as considering I spent all that time finishing it, it's relatively easy to do something that would mean you have to go back and finish it again. I noticed when flipping this upside down that this part wasn't actually flat, and upon lifting it up in order to turn it upside down, I was able to assess the weight of the piece, and there was certainly a touch more material I could get rid of. One of the trickiest things you encounter when making pots like this is trying to turn certain lines so they don't waver very much. For instance, the wall where this line is around the waist actually dips in slightly at one point, which means turning it to be a line that spins around perfectly without any undulations is actually really difficult, if not potentially impossible. So instead I just work it back from above and below to a point where it spins more or less level. It doesn't have to be perfect, because as soon as the wheel stops spinning, your eye will cease to notice the very subtle movement here. It's the foot of the bowl that's really the star of the show, though, and it being this tool really makes it a pedestal holding the rest of the shape up elegantly. It's also probably the trickiest part to trim, as this entire mass needs to be hollowed out, leaving the sides and the thickness of the floor of the bowl roughly the same thickness as the rest of the piece, as the last thing I want is to leave excessive thickness down here, especially in the very bottom, as that's one thing that really causes S-cracks to occur. I'm also trimming at quite an awkward height, hence this brief loss of control, as there's really very little to brace my hands against, as they're raised up to such a degree. On a lower shape, I can just tuck my arms into my torso and lean my upper body weight onto them to stabilise them, whereas up here, I have to rely on tucking my arms into my sides and bracing my hands together to add stability. Initially, as I create the outer edge, I try not to trim away too much in one go, as it's very easy to get carried away and to spoil the outer edge of the foot. So I sort of begin by half establishing the outer portion to create a barrier of sorts. I turn from the inside out, and I'm trying to mirror the beveled edge you can see on the outer portion of the foot ring. And with this set in stone, I can now begin properly hollowing out the centre. That's the first one of these finished, and I'll go into a bit more depth about turning the foot on the next piece. It's now the following day, and I actually ended up turning the bowl you just saw a bit more, mainly just to narrow the foot a touch, as previously I don't think the line was quite right and it was bulging out slightly. And from the 5 kilograms of clay this bowl was made from, it now weighs about 2.3, which should give you a good idea about just how much material gets carved off. But in a way it's what allows me to make shapes like this, with tall feet, angular walls, yet with a curved interior. This is the taller and wider piece, which again I'm just going to trim a skim off the bottom to level it, so that I can stick it onto the wheel a bit more securely. You can see that the foot here is actually wobbling from side to side, but in a way that's actually the best place for the unevenness to be, as that's where a majority of the excess clay is. So in order to trim it back to spinning true, I just have to turn away more from one side than the other, and as the base portion is mostly solid, doing this doesn't risk thinning out any portion too much, which it would do if I was turning the walls of the pot, trimming away more from one side than the other, as the walls of the pot are only so thin, and by turning in this manner you end up with one side of the pot that's wafer thin and the other side that's much thicker. Anyway, I'll be able to get away with it because the base of the pot is solid. So once again it's tap centered, in place, and once it's fully secured to the wheel head I can begin turning the interior. Normally this noise indicates that the clay is slightly too hard for my steel tools, but the tungsten carbide blades will still be able to bite right through it. When trimming the insides of pots like this, I try to work from top to bottom, working in stages. For instance, I tend to do all the turning and scraping, then I'll remove all the turnings, soften the surface with a sponge, and then do all the burnishing. By doing it in this order, I won't finish the inside, wet it and burnish it, and then trim the top, which would just sprinkle the damp surface I've just finished in lots of lovely shards of clay. These would embed themselves into the surface, and it makes tidying up thereafter just a touch more convoluted. So once the scraping is finished, which I do to remove the stronger throwing marks, I then sponge over the surface to soften it, and then I can use a smoother plastic kidney to burnish and really smooth these surfaces. The smoother and more tightly knitted surface of clay will help the glaze settle onto it in a neater layer. As if it were covered in lots of tiny specks where grog has been ripped out, the glaze would fill these as it's poured into the bowl, the air rushing out, creating lots of tiny pock marks, and some bigger ones, which I'll then feel the need to tidy up by rubbing over. So by having a smoother surface, less of that will happen, which is why I've been using a very dense sponge recently to soften the surface of my work. Dense being key, by the way, as it leaves practically no texture on the surface of the pot. You might have guessed, but I'm not really a fan of work that looks like it's been really clearly sponged. It's something that beginners can do, wiping every surface of their leather hard pots to remove fingerprints and other indentations. Yet, if these areas are left bare, without glaze, these over-sponged sections will show in the finished objects, and it can make them feel a bit naive and overworked. My opinion about sponging work to smooth it is that it's totally acceptable, as long as it doesn't become too obvious. After dealing with that brief invader, I can begin my favourite part again of trimming these bowls. Again, I'm using one of my loop tools, which I draw down in a straight line, both hands gripped around the tool, and I'm also resting my wrists on the wheel tray, all in an effort to keep my hands and that blade very sturdy. When you trim pots, if there is an undulation or a movement in the object, it's really easy to let the blade simply follow that motion, and in a way, any unevenness will simply become more and more exaggerated, the pot itself becoming even more wonky as you trim it. Instead, what you need to do is be able to hold and brace the blade to be steady enough that it simply turns through the undulation itself, instead of just simply following it along. Irritatingly, this is kind of an annoying thing to demonstrate on a pot that is mostly spinning correctly. But so often I see pots turned with the trimming tool held loosely in the maker's grip, and with the wheel spinning very slowly, both of which are qualities that can lead to inconsistent work and trimming that actually takes far too long. But I suppose it's just like learning to throw itself, as at the start, naturally you are very timid in your movements, and therefore it can take an age to centre the clay and to lift the walls up. And some of the advice I used to give when teaching beginners when I taught evening classes was just go for it. Pinch the clay and lift it and really try to move it around quickly, as ultimately I think you need to impart a lot more force than you think, or at least you want to be the one in control. You don't want the clay to control you, and I suppose that's sort of what I'm saying about trimming. Often people new to this particular skill take it far too slowly and let the clay's movement influence what the blade does. And it's a fear that's perhaps a bit more justified, as when you're trimming pots, you're trimming already successfully thrown objects, and therefore the idea of ruining them can be pretty disheartening to a beginner. The thing is, when learning to make pottery, you've got to destroy a lot of pottery, and you'll make far more progress by trying and failing 100 times, as compared to spending a similar amount of time working much more slowly on a very small handful of pots. Although you can't quite see it, I'm using the rarely seen chin brace here. Both hands grip the tool and I'm pressing them against my chin, again connecting hands to body in order to add strength and stability to my movements. I'm also, again out of picture, resting my right elbow on a bag of clay to raise it up. This made this particular position a lot more comfortable, and it reminded me of trimmers I've seen in China who are trimming huge porcelain pots that brace themselves on long sticks that they hold in conjunction with the tool. The only real downside about trimming tool feet like this is the constant need to fish out the turnings that end up getting trapped inside. So instead, I try to fish them out with the tool as I've finished turning, as otherwise I have to scoop them out with my left hand in between trims. The one thing you may notice is that I've left the internal walls quite rough and groove-ridden. I try not to focus on tidying this up until I've achieved the overall depth, at which point I'll trim back over these walls to flatten and straighten them. As for knowing how deep to trim, when the internal floor reaches a similar depth to the walls on the outside, I'll gently press on the bottom, searching for any subtle movement. If I feel like it bows in even slightly, then I know it's time to stop turning. You also, depending on how hard the clay is, want to be careful about how hard you press, as if you press too firmly and you don't double check the interior, you could end up with a crack on the inside from where you push too abruptly from this side. I then smooth the interior surface by running a damp sponge over it, and do the same for the foot too. This softening of the clay makes burnishing easier, especially if your clay has dried out a bit too much. Finally, the foot itself can be stamped, which I do whilst pressing in from either side so the foot doesn't splay outward as it's impressed from the top. I trimmed this piece on a wooden bat, which is something I should have done for the first part, as it makes flipping it back the right way up much easier, as previously I had to squeeze the foot itself, gripping my hands on either side of it in order to get purchase, which could on some level cause the foot itself to be distorted and become oval. But by flipping it around like this, there's absolutely no potential of deforming it. The one thing the wooden bat does do though, is impart its texture into the lip of the bowl. To remedy this, I give the piece a quick sponge over, again using the very dense sponge as to not create too much of a textured surface. And with that, that's the two bowls trimmed and finished for the time being. The next step is also really important, and that's drying these bowls out incredibly slowly, again so they dry as evenly as possible, as now that they're much thinner, if one side dries out more quickly than the other, it'll impart a much more dramatic undulation into the object, so it's wrapped tightly with plastic, and I'll leave it like this all the way up until it's bone dry. I'll have to catch you up on the rest of the progress with these in a later video, but for now, thank you so much for taking your time to watch, and as always, I'll see you next time.